What is your most terrifying animal encounter? I'm from Florida, and I was volunteering at a local nature conservancy. One of our tasks was to remove fallen logs that were blocking up a creek after a big storm. The creek was about chest deep, 15 feet wide, and opaque brown. Many Florida freshwater ways a brown sea of tannins leached into the river from trees. As I'm moving logs, I notice a 12-foot alligator on the embankment I hadn't noticed before. It then slid into the creek I was in. I was with a land manager who was moving logs with me, and a herpetologist who was in the canoe. I asked them what to do and they responded, well, those logs aren't gonna move themselves, and that gator's probably just trying to get away from us. Still, spending 30 minutes in a creek you can't see anything, knowing there's an alligator lurking near your feet, moving logs which looked like alligators was one of the most nerve-wracking things I've ever done. Edit. Definitely didn't expect this to blow up. I've told this story a million times and it usually gets a "huh, that's wild" reaction. But most of my co-workers and many of my friends are natural resource workers, so they are used to this stuff. I've been woken up by a bear sniffing my head once. Was cowboy camping, no tent, in Leal Canyon in Yosemite once, when I hear something sniff right next to my head. My sleep-addled brain thinks it's a ranger on a horse telling me to move my camp. Had hiked about 20 miles that day. You have to be at least 4 miles into the canyon to camp, and I wasn't 100% sure I'd made it far enough, since it was dark when I set up camp. Anyways, I say just 1 second, sit up, grope for my flashlight and turn it on to see a black bear a couple feet away. I holler, he tears off. I get out and empty my bladder and try to fall back asleep until I hear him coming around again. I make a bunch more noise, decide I'm not getting any more sleep, break camp and slowly night hike until the sun rises. When I was 12, a young stallion decided he wanted to play with me and almost killed me. He kicked and bit me and tried to trample me. He was my pet and was only treating me the way he'd treat a peer. I even knew that while it was happening. I made a huge mistake by turning my back on him while he was playful. He bit me and pulled me down. Knocked me down a couple of more times with a forefoot when I tried to get up. Reared up over me to stamp me a couple of times too. Still have the scar on my leg and that was a long time ago. Literally pissed myself during. My dad basically saved my life by chasing him off. His response was, "That was close. What did you learn?" At the time I was working until 1 AM, so I wouldn't get home until 2 or so. I opened the door to the house and felt what I thought was a breeze come by my leg. I don't really pay attention. Walk over to my desk, put my keys down, and turn the light on. Right when I do so, there are 2 possums in the act of mating in the middle of my kitchen. They screamed, I screamed, and we began the 3-hour dance of getting them out of my house. I ended up trapping them in a dog cage and dumping them out in the middle of my backyard. Edit. To avoid confusion, they were opossums, not their Australian cousins. I moved to Colorado. About a month in, one night I had gone to bed and woke up on severe pain hours later. I felt nausea, throbbing pain around my abdomen, my muscles and back ached. I turned on the lights and I had in my sleep rolled over a black widow spider and crushed it to death, which at some point had bit me. Its carcass lay in my bed. I freaked out, called 911, and put it in a mason jar, so they thought I wasn't crazy. I was brought to the hospital where they treated me with pain management medications. The venom continued to spread. Every muscle ached and felt as though my body was being crushed. It soon began to get hard to breathe and my blood pressure became irregular. The morphine has me drifting in and out of sleep. I prayed to God, who hours earlier I wasn't even sure I believed in 12 hours I discharged. The venom ran its course for about 4 days, and he bite site intermittently itched 4 weeks. For the next year or 2 I had anxiety trying to go to sleep, and reoccurring nightmares of the experience. I did field work back and forth between the US/UK and East and Southern Africa for 10 years, and in that time period, Spent a good chunk of my life living at remote base camps, so I have a few crap yourself moments that I can list off the top of my head. I was chased by an elephant. It was worse as she had a calf. I know for a fact that I was stalked by at least 2 big cats twice, one being a leopard as it was the only large species around at the field site, and the other was most likely a rogue male lion, given that one was seen close by earlier and was known to hang out in the area. This one occurred in Alaska. It was my day off, and I was reading in the main tent as everyone went into town, and I turned around, only to find a moose cow and calf about 5 meters away from me. This is the most recent event. We were having a party one night and I guess someone forgot to shut the kitchen door. I woke up in the morning hungover and decided to make coffee. The rubbish bag was underneath the sink, and I heard something in it. I was directly over it, and I saw coils within striking distance from a Mozambique spitting cobra. That was only a crap yourself moment. 2 spotted hyenas broke into our camp, killed a few dogs, and then went over to a few tents, including mine, and pushed their muzzle through. The most surreal thing about that was, if you know anything about spotted hyenas, they actually make a noise every now and then, or every fucking night, called a whoop. It's insanely loud. One of them actually made that noise. It hurt my ears, but interestingly enough, it turns out that there is actually a growl that is always made directly after the whoop. So, really close up it sounds like whoop, grrrr, and so on. I have a few other stories, but none of them were as terrifying as those, or made me feel that my life was directly threatened. Hello fellow field worker. I was studying orangutans deep in the Bornean rainforest, 3 days travel from the nearest town. We lived in huts with limited electricity and no running water. I was up working late one night, and at about 3 AM I needed to pee, so I put on my boots and went for a walk. On my way to the river I walk by where we stored food waste. Just as I'm approaching this area, a large cat came out from behind a tree about 2 meters in front of me. We both stood there staring at each other without moving. I wasn't afraid, I was just trying to identify it as there are a lot of different cats in that area. I reached to my pocket and got my headlamp out. When I turned it on, the cat turned and ran away, and no sooner did it run than I near shat myself in fear. All the adrenaline was gone, and I was just stunned and terrified. I had come face to face with one of the world's most beautiful animals, a clouded leopard. I'll never forget that moment, or the relief I felt when I made it back to my hut. I'll never forget the time this kid rode into the servo I was working in. Literally rode into the store on his bike. He would have been about 10, and he is in tears. He asked me to call his mum, because he'd been chased for about a kilometer by a swooping magpie. I try to call his mum, but there is no answer. I buy him lemonade, because he's out of breath and distraught, and then try to phone his mum again. Still no answer. I go outside to see if the magpie's gone. It appears to be, so the kid thanks me and heads off again. He gets onto the footpath and the magpie attacks. He drops his bike and just runs across the forecourt and back into the store. It's stalking me. He screams, and seeing that I know what he is going through, I call him a taxi and pay for it to drop him home. I was tree planting in northern British Columbia. Was working on the same piece as another planter for about an hour, then heard a soft thumping sound. Looked up and saw an adult grizzly bear running towards the other planter, whose back was to the bear. I started running towards it, waving my arms and yelling. The bear stopped, turned towards me, and stood on its hind legs. I stopped moving, and was about 20 to 30 feet away from it. The bear stared at me for about 5 seconds, felt like an eternity, dropped back down, turned around and bolted back into the tree line. Saw 2 cubs with it that we weren't anywhere close to, so we figured it was probably a mother teaching its cubs how to hunt. I had to sit down for a while after that, because my legs were shaking so bad. I was attacked by a giant monstrous goose. It was at least the size of a goose, and it was as wild and dangerous as a goose. Okay, it was just a normal goose, but it was really scary. I was just minding my own business taking a walk while listening to music when this evil creature decides that I'm its mortal enemy and starts charging me out of nowhere. Thanks to my vigorous training and extensive experience, I handled the situation in calm and stoic fashion by shrieking like a girl and punching the critter on top of its head. And then, not unlike a small child that has just kicked a ball through the neighbor's window, I panicked and ran the hell away. I'm the living embodiment of masculinity. Driving down the highway and a spider drops out from the visor and hangs in midair in front of me, then just vanishes in my lap. I blacked out, but the passengers in my Uber said I was screaming, "We're all gonna die," over and over. Stalked by a mountain lion at a church camp. Walking along. Felt that eerie feeling of being followed. Heard it growl. Saw it staring me down from the bushes 40 yards off, and then I sprinted downhill 20 feet to a cabin. 10-year-old me didn't know to appear large and back away slowly. Fortunately, a cabin was very nearby and the mountain lion wasn't in maximum stealth mode. Nobody believed me, save one person. At a church camp. These people were creationists who believed the 600-year-old dude built a massive floating zoo, but a mountain lion in the mountains. Nap, bullcrap, kid. Thank you for watching Internet's Funniest. Please like, share, and subscribe.